Good morning. John Hawley here with Seals in Recovery. I'm here with Dan R. He can disclose his last name, but I will anyways. Dan Rice. This is our fourth podcast with Seals in Recovery, and Dan's got a great story. I started working with Dan, how many, 3 years ago?
4 years ago.
4 years ago, I came into Seals in Recovery, and I was lucky enough to be his sponsor. And Dan has done everything right to this day. He was definitely the Rookie of the Year in Seals in Recovery. Then he had a banner year the next year. He was the MVP, and he's done an incredible job. He's a great American hero, and he's overcome a lot. So we're going to talk to Dan about, how it was growing up, what got him into the teams, his team life, what stumbling blocks he had with alcoholism, how he sorted it out, and where he is now. But I also know this. I know Dan's three boys. They're wonderful. Ethan, Owen, and Tanner. I know him very well. He's a great dad, and he has a lot to offer this world. And amazingly enough, through all this turmoil he's had, he's got an MBA. He's got counseling certificates. He started his own business. So he's an amazing guy. So good morning, Dan.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on.
The first thing I'd like to go up is, growing up. Where did you grow up? Your parents, your siblings, your activities growing up, your memories of childhood, and then segue into your decision to actually join the Navy and what attracted you to the SEAL teams.
Yeah, so I grew up in Massachusetts, Central Mass, a place called Shrewsbury. It's right next to Worcester, and typical childhood, sports that I did in high school.
What sports did you play, Dan?
I ran track, did cross country, played soccer growing up, but switched over to track and running in high school, and which helped out a lot going through buds. Ever since I was a kid, I saw a SEAL demonstration in Coronado, and
Family vacation we were out there for? Or?
I was visiting my aunt, and it just had me hooked since then. I was always in the back of my head, hey, I want to be a SEAL. And I actually still have like a little thing when I was in second or third grade, which said like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like Navy SEAL.
Wow.
So that was always in the back of my head. I had considered doing like FBI and police and things like that also, but always wanted to be a SEAL sniper. So, but that was growing up. So then joined the Navy when I was 20, and wanted to be a SEAL.
Did you have parents or no?
Yes, I did have parents.
I'm just wondering.
So, grew up with my parents. My parents got divorced when I was young. I lived with my mom and my stepfather, and but still had a lot of interaction with my dad.
And I've met your stepfather, and he was a very important part of your life, correct?
Yep. He was really good, great example, and couldn't have asked for anything better,
And you have a brother?
Yes, I have two brothers.
That's two brothers.
So I have an older brother. He was a police officer. He ended up getting shot and medically retired after that. And my younger brother, I have a younger brother also, which a 10-year difference. And so he does work with like surgeons and like stuff like that. So really likes that aspect. So
Let me ask you something else. Was college an option getting out of school? Were you pushed towards it, or you screw it, I'm going to the Navy?
So 9/11 had happened. The wars were going on, and I just kind of was like, hey, I felt that it was my duty to go serve. Always wanted to be a SEAL, and I was like, hey, you know what, let's go do it.
Absolutely. And you went to Buds.
Yep.
You went to Buds 2 times.
Yep.
Which is very interesting.
Yep.
I think it's very interesting. You talk about experience at Buds, but your duty station was super interesting in between Buds and Gitmo.
Yep. So signed up to go be a SEAL. Did not make the first time. I was able to swim very well in the pool, but not so much in the waves. And that was like an El Nino year. And the waves were huge. Couldn't get out past the waves. And so like I just, I'd gotten close with a couple buddies. One of my best buddies quit like earlier in the day during that evolution. And I just like was like, oh man, I can't get out past the surf, like I don't deserve to be here, things like that, So, and so, I mean, I didn't quit during an evolution. It was late at night and I was just like, hey, you know what? I'm warm. I have food in my belly. And, but I just felt bad. Like, hey, I'm not upholding the standard.
Why did you feel like you weren't deserving of being there? Because that's a very interesting statement, because I know I'm going through some stuff early in childhood that I don't deserve things because of how I was brought up. I know it's not your story, but it's very interesting that you say that.
Yeah, so I just was like, hey, the standard's so high, and you have to meet that standard to be a C, so, and I was like, hey, I can't even get out past the surf. We're getting crushed in the surf zone and with the waves, and I didn't know how to swim through the waves at that point. And so I was just like, hey, if I can't do this, I don't deserve to like be amongst the best warriors.
And if you haven't been out to California in the wintertime or the fall, the surf is amazingly big. They build a berm out there, and you get up for swims at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and from your room you could hear the waves booming. I mean, absolutely booming. 200 yards away, and the surf is no joke. Yeah. And the frequency of the sets they're not swells. It's hard. It's hard swimming.
Yeah. So that was difficult. And at that time, it was also like, hey, if you get performance dropped, you can never return. But if you DOR, you can return, and you could return within.
Is that right? Performance drops couldn't return
at that time.
Wow.
So, but if you DOR'd, you could return within a year. Like the turnaround was pretty quick.
Year?
Within a year.
That's great.
So, I DOR'd. Regretted it after, but that's, the path that it took. And so got sent out to Hawaii. So I got letters of recommendation from the staff.
What was your rate at that time?
Master at Arms.
Master at Arms. Oh, the whole cup thing.
Yeah. So got sent out to Hawaii. Went out to Hawaii, became Harbor Patrol out of Hawaii, and got qualified on a couple things out there, being like a base cop and Harbor Patrol. And let them know, hey, my intent is to return to Buds, and within a year. And so then it came up that they needed people to deploy to Gitmo, and so they came up with a deal that if I volunteered to go to Gitmo, then they'd send me to Buds right after. So I was like, all right, let's go to Gitmo. So I left for Gitmo a couple days later.
The significance of Gitmo was all the high-value detainees were sent there off the battlefield in firstly Afghanistan and Iraq. So
yeah, so I signed up to go fight terrorists and then
babysit
them. So
how was that whole thing going with him? What was your interaction? It's so interesting.
So the interaction, like I was a block guard down there, so daily interaction, and I was in, not to give like too much information, but I was in the camp that is a little bit more relaxed, but it's more the who's who. So very high value people.
Yeah.
And so you have the daily interactions, and you get to know them. You get to and there's a lot of times people are like, oh, terrorists, this, that, the other. They're dumb. They're this, but
they're not dumb.
There's some very, very intelligent guys down there, and so you get to know them. But I did my job and was very, just neutral, doing my job. Whenever people talk about abuse and things like that, it's not even close.
Here's a question. So when you got to the teams and you did what you did overseas, and your first interaction was, Islamic extremists, did you always agree with everybody's views? Because I've had to sit, what I do for a living, with these people occasionally to exchange information. And my views changed extremely. My view extremely changed when I sat with these guys and I hear their background. It could be bullshitting, but the thing is, moving forward out of the teams, it was very interesting to have interaction with them. Yeah,
it's different. It definitely changes perspective.
Not letting him off the hook for anything.
Yeah, no, not letting them off the hook. But just as you hear their side, and you look at some of that, and you're like, okay, I understand some of their side, or understand some of their culture. And
It
that's
doesn't justify what they do.
No,
but,
it doesn't.
But you understand it.
But you understand it. But then you also understand, like, okay, this is your culture, and this is what your belief is. And then you can understand more of, like, how it gets to where it gets, and then it's like, hey, well, we want to go in and instill this. And it's like, that doesn't work with certain culture, you know? So like it's just here, we want to instill what we have and our value, where it's like, hey, that's not, that will never work.
It'll never work.
So,
Our foreign diplomacy in that arena is horrible.
so that just comes with like, hey, having understanding that people are different.
Right.
And, working together on that, but yeah, not to let anybody off the hook, but I could definitely empathize and see different things, but at the end of the day, the battlefield's the battlefield, and so
you go to Buds, you make it through.
yep. So went back through Buds, passed everything, first shot, like.
Did they remember you?
Some of the instructors remembered me. I had a couple of them like support me coming back. But yeah, so it was good. Went right through, no rolls, anything like that. And honestly, I was just happy to be there. Like, guys would like come around me during Hell Week and stuff, just because I was just like, oh, it was awesome, like.
Your perspective changes.
Yeah, perspective changes, and they're like, this is miserable. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is good.
Yeah. Well, that's a perspective change. That's terrific.
Yeah.
And when you went through Buds, what was the pipeline? Was it SQT? Or was it a different, what was it?
So it was SQT. So you go to Alaska, then SQT. And we had the jump pipeline also.
Oh, that's
so
great.
Straight to free fall.
That's good.
Yep.
We used to outsource a lot of the air operations to the Army and joint commands, but that's good. So you finished SQT. You got your bird. What team did you go to?
So I went to, because I was an EMT beforehand. So I never worked on an ambulance, but I had my EMTB. And
They sent you to Corps School?
so I went to 18 Delta.
No shit. I did not know that.
At Fort Bragg. So went to 18 Delta at Fort Bragg, and then checked into Team 10.
How was your new guy experience at 10?
Well, there's a lot of hazing at 10. 10 was known as like the hazing team. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And there were a couple guys that turned in their birds because of hazing.
Really? Snowflakes? It's
Yeah, I mean,
message,
it was a little excessive at that time,
I go. I'm a 90s guy.
But,
Where?
But it was good. I mean, the guys I had that brought me up were awesome. And, I'm great buddies with all of them.
Who do you consider one of your mentors in the teams?
DJ Shipley.
Yeah,
So,
his
like,
dad. His dad was my sponsor's chief.
Yeah, so he's
good
my
family.
sea daddy.
Nice.
And so, like, it was just brought up right, There were so many guys, Steph Bass.
He's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Steph's got an incredible story. If you've heard the whole thing.
Oh yeah, and like I know Steph very well.
Yeah.
Barrett Johnson, like
Barrett
there's so
Johnson.
many great like
So
leaders.
Steph Bass was there when Mike Spann got killed.
Yep.
The first guy killed in Afghanistan was a CIA agent.
Yep.
Masha Sharif, was it? Yeah. The whole uprising.
Yep.
We weren't handling the prisoners that great then.
So, but and so we knew where we were going. Like we had the strike force piece in Iraq. So training was hard, but we were training.
Were you prepared when you got there for the level of training that you got, and you got feet dry in country?
Yeah,
that's great to hear.
We were prepared. Like at one point, I literally was like, we were invincible. Like it was like we're invincible. Like I thought it for a little bit.
Yeah.
So, that stayed for a long time.
Until
where
somebody
it's like,
gets
wow,
stinged up.
like, hey, like, but it is like, hey, we're really, really good.
You are. We're the best in the world.
So,
There's no doubt about that.
but yeah, so that was like a great experience. Came back from that.
What were you, as E5 then? E6?
I was at E5, and then I made E6 in Iraq.
So you were a pecker checker all the way through? You're the corpsman of your element? Or
Yep.
what were you calling it back? Assault team, boat crew, what do you call it?
Fire team.
Fire team? 'Cause
Yeah.
it changes every 2 years.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so I was the, corpsman. Yeah.
Did
the
you
medic.
did you do any civil stuff as a corpsman with the civilian populace?
No. The only thing I had to do was I had to work on some of the people we shot. And that's just with
Is that a hard thing to put that different hat on, or you just
No.
mechanically go through
You
it?
know what? It's one of those things like, hey, like, yeah, it stinks that you just tried to like ambush us
Yeah.
and then would have killed all of us. And then now we just shot a bunch of you guys up. And then now, when I got a word, they're like, hey, you'll give medical attention to these people. I'm like,
There's not a
Roger
lot
that.
of there's not a lot of forces in the world that would do what we do for combatants that
Yeah. Yep. So I treated them the exact same as if it would have been one of our guys, so like packaged up, good treatment.
Could you see the empathy? Could you? Were they surprised you worked on them? Could you see it, even though there's a language barrier? You might have had a Terp with you, but
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
got to go from this guy's going to kill me to, oh shit, he's helping me.
yeah, I mean, I think they realize like that, we do follow the rules and stuff
Yeah.
like that, so,
For the most part.
and that's one thing that was kind of weird too, because it's like things would happen and then you look on like CNN, you're like, that's totally wrong.
Well,
And then like
I'm trying to keep
from
this
the truth,
apolitical, my friend. I was going to wear my I Stand With Israel today, but I'm not doing it. But no, it is wrong. They're not seeing the truth. They're not seeing what servicemen do on a daily basis with empathy and care and everything else.
Yeah.
What gets highlighted is the bad stuff, and it's very unfortunate, even within our community.
Yeah. So some of that like is just disappointing. And but there's different things. Like it all the times like we always follow the rules and dealt with things accordingly.
Well, we don't follow the rules. You're going to get court-martial, captain's masters. And even in the 90s when we started doing shipboarding and everything else, lawyers became very heavily involved, and rules of engagement had consequences. I was lucky enough to get my bird pinned on by Norm Hawley. He was a legend of Vietnam and a great businessman, just a great guy. And he said when he pinned our birds on, he goes, look, you do what you feel is right out there. Screw the rules of engagement. I'd rather fight a battle for you legally than tell your wife, your brother, your sister, your mom or dad you're dead. So it was interesting. Even in then, they could see the horizon coming legally with the restraints of what you do in downrange.
Yeah.
But it got very political, depending on the administration, what was going on down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got done with your first pump. You get back. You're still at 10. What was your next? And you went to what did you went to a specialty school, ASOT, too? Did you study? Is it ASOT? Not ASOT. What is it called?
I don't even know.
Yes, you do. It's a secret squirrel stuff. There's like 3 levels.
I did go to
It's out there,
a little course on that. But.
Yeah, but my point is did you enjoy that capacity because it opened up other doors for you?
Yeah, so that was a cool school to go to. Very eye-opening.
Yeah.
Different than assaulting, but
Yeah.
more sneaky peeky.
Yeah, no, it's good. Did you enjoy the transition into that role, getting out of your regular, I'll say 101, SEAL responsibilities and corpsman stuff? Did you find it more intriguing, more challenging, more isolating? Did your drinking escalate? I mean, when did your drinking kind of start ramping up? Because Deanna's got a very interesting story. He didn't drink as a kid. His burn rate from starting to drinking to hit his bottom, and he'll talk about his bottom, was very, very confined. It was like, it wasn't. It was very, very interesting, his story.
Yeah, so the drinking really started, I had a couple back-to-back deployments, And one of them I had a 6-day turnaround. And so got back from Afghanistan. Had a 6-day, the day I got back, it was like, hey, you're going back in 6 days. So I was like, oh,
You're married at the time?
great. You know, no,
Not yet.
no, not yet. And, but it just like throws some of your plans off because you're like, oh, I'm coming back from deployment, you know. And, I mean, at that point, I'd been deployed a lot. And for a lot of the time, I think I had like an 8-pack of toilet paper that lasted me like, at my house, lasted me like 3 years.
Did you deploy with 10 that time, or was that when you went with a different team?
So I came back, I augmented as a medic with Damneck, with development group, and then came back and then did a surge deployment with 10. So we had to do a surge deployment. Some of the guys went to Europe, and a handful of us went back to Afghanistan.
Okay.
So, and I was with the Polish GROM and the Polish First Special Forces, which great guys.
So did your drinking started in your first deployment after your back-to-backs?
No. So that was just that deployment, and then came back for a little bit, then deployed again, and then after that, that was like the VSO mission, where you're kind of just like embedded in the middle of the hornet's nest and duking it out, and then came back from that, and that's where I was burnt out at that point, and came back, and that's when the my drinking got bad, and like I ended up going out to Buds as a Buds instructor,
That was their answer.
and
They'll give you some more time to do whatever you want.
well, at that point, I was married, and my ex's father wasn't doing so hot, so went out there so that it could be closer to California.
Can you, and you can go as in depth, and, again, Dan's my sponsee, and I did the steps with him, and we did, 4 and 5, familiar with AA. It's a reflection of things you did in your life, and then step 5 is you admitted to another alcoholic. Can you go into, because I think this was a pivotal part when I hear your whole story. There was one particular mission, they weren't following the tracks inside, in and out of where you're supposed to be going, and somebody hit an ID, and it was just a shit show, and you were injured, and you didn't know it, and it saddens me that they didn't take care of you, and I think that, I'm not a doctor, but I think it was contributory to, where you wound up. If you can explain, as much as you can about that. It's very touching, and he is a true hero.
So that one, we knew there were certain IDs, and we had come in a certain way, but we had watched the tracks that we were on, so we knew we could go back out through that. Some of the vehicles we were in could take a blast, some of them couldn't.
Well, you were in a Razor or something, right? Or a quad?
An LTA TV.
Yeah, and the other guys were in MRAPs?
So it was a MAT V.
Okay,
which
MAT
is,
V.
yeah. So, but still the V hull, which can take a blast.
Yeah.
And so we're getting ready to go. We had some Army guys with us from the 82nd, and they were driving in the wrong tracks. Like, oh shit, in the wrong tracks.
Of course, the comms don't work.
Trying to get comms with them. Hey, stop. And so zung up. Went to try to like wave them down. And I was like, I'll go a little bit further. And then I was like, at that point, I'll stop. But it hit the ID before that. And it rocked me. And it's funny because like, like in the teams, it's a little bit different. But like, my buddy, they're like, oh shit, like Dan's dead. And then guys are like, I'm getting his TV.
I know, going through his kit bags, let's grab his credit card before it's canceled.
So I'm like, you assholes. But I mean, I don't remember, you know what I mean? They just joke around talking about it. But, and then that definitely rocked me, threw my hormones off and everything like that.
But you had told me that, after that, you engaged in the firefight, you could remember just bits and pieces of it.
Yep. So guys didn't even realize, like, how messed up I was, because I was still like, hey, tactically, like making calls, because
Like a
you're just
machine.
I mean, you're up and you're just like, hey, like this tactically makes sense, even though you have no idea what's really going on. So, but yeah, no, that definitely rocked me, and that stunk. Like IEDs, I definitely had an issue with IEDs just because there's so many IEDs like out there.
Yeah.
Like it was unbelievable. I forget exactly what it was, but our EOD guy like has to have some record. Like I mean, it was like the number was so insane, and he was awesome. And but I mean, there are IEDs everywhere. We were
Yeah.
bipping IEDs left and right. So being an LTA TV, that still like sends me like, well, not now, but like when I was still at Buds, I would still jump a little bit when guys would like key up the radio. Like it would still like, oh, hey, I just hit
That
it.
was a
You know what I
little
mean?
bit of a trigger.
And that would be like, we'd mess with each other. Just because whoever was the lead Vic, like in the LTA TV, like when you'd hear that key up, you'd be like, oh, you know, so because you're like, oh, my toast. But so yeah, no, that was a very interesting deployment. It was definitely bad guy territory. They owned it, and we were there just duking it out with them.
So you got back from that one, and then following that point, you went to Buds.
Yeah.
Did you have anything treated? I mean, did they know how messed up you were? You know, with TBI or anything else?
No. So I mean, you know how it's gotten a lot better.
Well, they get it.
But
It's a
during-
new ridge line.
During that time, it was like you stay away from medical. You know.
Yeah, because
So,
then you're
like,
not deploying.
Yep. So you don't get sidelined. So they're like, "How are you?" You're like, "What would Jesus say?" And that's how you are. You know. So like, definitely stayed away from medical, and that has gotten a lot better in the teams. In the now, and but it wasn't the case at that time. So, but
It's a paradigm change, and as far as and Dan's very active in SEALs and recovery, and he was, you know, I consider him one of the founders, even though he's a new guy. He came to many meetings and never missed one. But even now, and they won't mind me saying it, we're getting direct conversation with, you know, with the doctors in Spec War that they're getting done with their active duty guys, and they're referring to us, and it doesn't ding their career up. They just want these guys to get better.
yeah, and I think that's like most of the just getting that out to guys, like, hey, this doesn't ding you at all, you know. And there's a lot of guys that I talk with, and I mean, you know them now, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
we bring
yeah,
guys in,
yeah.
and it's like, hey, like this doesn't ding you, this will help you, and that's one thing that, you know, it took me a couple times of trying to quit drinking. Like I didn't even like it. It was just my coping mechanism, and but now I try to spread that word to everybody, like, hey, like this does work. And I wish that it was like, hey, this worked. And I wish that somebody came in to me like that first time, you know?
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way, man. You know that.
I mean,
it's
at the end of the
hard.
day-
You could plant a seed, and how many people do you know now that you got some sobriety is like, can you go talk to that person? Like, unless that person wants some help, you could plant a seed, a mustard seed, and maybe it works. But it's hard, man.
Yeah. Well,
Especially when you identify it in a person.
yeah, the problem I had was the people at first that I interacted with at AA, I didn't have that connection.
Well,
it was
like I said,
okay.
and I might have said in another podcast, is it's not People's Anonymous.
Yeah.
And it could be very confusing to a new person going to AA, actually what it's about.
So, and that was like, hey, trying to get everything, my life back in like place. But it, like some of the people that I interact with, it's like, oh, you're like addicted to AA, you know? And it's like, you know, everything was like, and it's like, I can't read like, you know, 50 pages a night and
Yeah.
this, that, so like, it just was like, it wasn't going to happen. And then also with traveling, and it's like, hey, as soon as I was done with treatment, it's like, hey, I'm back on the road.
Yes, so we share this commonality is like, I know the big book, he knows the big book. I'm not a big book thumper, nor are you. We understand that you have to go on with life and you know, make it work with your spouse and respect boundaries and go out and make a living and contribute financially, be present. You can't hide in AA.
Yep.
So I always say whatever works for you, whether it's AA, smart recovery, clergy, clinician, whatever. But you're right. You know that it's hard if that's the mandate. You have enough stress with your life, getting sober with mandates from a sponsor that's going to try to make you read 50 pages a night and fill out a bunch of questionnaires to reflect on a Saturday for 3 hours, which we don't have.
Yeah. So, and even after, because I went to a couple different things, and but even after that, I was like, I didn't drink for over a year, but I wasn't sober, so I was just white knuckling it. It's like, okay, I'm not drinking, but then as soon as things get out of control or too stressful,
Go back to you go out to Buds, and then it got exponentially worse.
So I went out to Buds. I just dealt with it for a while,
Just
even
squashed it all.
No, just trying to just deal with life, trying to deal with everything, while struggling, and even through my platoon chief and everything, and still performing very well.
Of course.
And then after that, that's when it was like, all right, now I've reached a milestone, and
in your mind.
And that's when I was like, okay, let me go and say how I'm doing, and then they were like, okay, we need to send you to NICO for TBI and things like that. And then even with drinking, I went and told them, I was like, hey, I'm drinking too much. I would like to go to level 1. And they're like, yes, we'll send you to level 1. And so I was slated. I had a date to go to level 1, and which level 1 is outpatient. So you go, you learn about it, and then something that had nothing to do with me happened. That's when all these dudes pop for drugs and stuff like that. So nothing to do with me. Everybody was tested for piss tested, and mine totally clean, But they were like, hey, you have PTSD and TBI.
Of course.
So now everybody with PTSD and TBI is automatically going to level 3.
That was their knee-jerk reaction?
That was their knee-jerk reaction from the top.
That's ridiculous.
And the providers were like, Dan, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, closing on a house, and I have to go to level 3. And so now I'm inpatient. I'm pissed off about it, And
I would love the evidence I would love the evidence that they had to this knee-jerk reaction. There's probably none with PTSD, TBI, that you're going to have a drinking or drug problem. That's not the case, and we know that.
Yeah. So
that's remarkable.
It was just, it was crappy. And then even when you check in there, it was just I was thrown off right from the beginning. And so still did the stuff, and, but mainly was just trying to get through it, and then even after that, white knuckled it for over a year. But I hadn't fixed underlying things, and I hadn't found that tribe. I hadn't found, hey, this is the group of people, nobody was really guiding me through. I was just, hey, I'll do this. And I would tell myself I'm allergic to alcohol, and I was feeling better, but I wasn't working on any of the underlying stuff.
Well,
so
we say it all the time. Alcohol is just a symptom of some deep, deep shit, and it's true.
So that turned into telling myself oh, now I've been sober for over a year. Hey, I can have one. I can control it. I have this
that always
under control.
Works.
So that's how it started. Oh, I'll have one glass of wine, but it's okay, and this is fine. And it was a conversation, and with my ex-wife at the time, and next thing you know, it gets out of control, and so, and with that, had a little flashback, and started to call in close air support in my room.
Were you seeing a shrink at that point?
Yeah, I was seeing a shrink, and
we all see shrinks in the teams now, so it's chic.
So, and then, after that, went to another place and for PTSD and alcohol, and came out of there. And that one, I was feeling good coming out of there. And
was that the Meadows?
No,
what one was that?
That one was Laurel Ridge.
Okay.
and then COVID happened. So COVID happened, and then just everything. So all of the resources
Tried up.
were shut down.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like, hey, there's no like meeting with shrinks. There's no meeting
Yeah.
with this. There's no AA. There's no like nothing. Everything totally shut down, and so all of the resources completely shut down. Still white knuckled it, but again, not with the right tribe, not with the right group. Just getting through it.
So Dan talks about the tribe thing, and we really thrive with your tribe, and connection is protection with SEALs and recovery. That's a thing, and I did my sober tip of the other day is you have to find like-minded people. I'll help anybody out that wants to get help, but I don't, I've never lived in the woods. I've never lost everything. I couldn't tell you about it. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what doctors go through, pilots. I can tell you what I went through as a retired SEAL and the commonality we have going through BUDS, and I help a lot of people. I came into the civilian pipeline, but it's finding those people that you can resonate with, or they can resonate with you, is a big thing, because you don't have to re-explain yourself. When we have this commonality, use your words, John, in even phraseology for us, we know what we're talking about, where, I got a great sponsor. Charlie's a Vietnam vet, 3 tours. Charlie is a Marine vet, and he doesn't understand everything that I have with my SEAL group.
Yeah.
So it's hard. So it's very important to find the people that resonate, similar experiences, and maybe similar background. That's the way I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, with COVID, next thing you know, all the stress, again, go back to, hey, what's the coping mechanism? And those spirals just got faster and faster. And and then the third time, like I ended up.
So you felt like everything was physically speeding up?
Well, just the spiral down would
Okay.
get worse, and ultimately ended like with me getting drunk and, like being so stressed out, and there's other circumstances around it too,
Yeah.
but almost blowing my head off,
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, and that was very, luckily, I mean, the psych, or my psychiatrist, it was on a Sunday, and my psychiatrist, and I knew I was in a bad spot, and I knew like, hey,
Well, I'm glad you knew it.
I need to call the psychiatrist, and luckily she picked up,
That's phenomenal.
I mean, that's a Sunday. She didn't have to pick up, but it would have definitely like, cause I was thinking, I'm like, oh, like I'll shoot myself there because it'll be easier to clean up.
That's the way we think.
So, but it was like, hey, I'm thinking, hey, I'm the problem, like my thinking was I'll remove the problem and things will get better
For everybody else.
So, but luckily she picked up, and then a bunch of guys came and brought me. I spent a week in the psych ward,
Portsmouth or VB?
Portsmouth,
Okay.
and then went to the Meadows, and
And the Meadows is good for you, right?
yeah, the Meadows is great.
Plug to the Meadows. And where is it at?
Arizona.
Arizona.
Like, highly recommend the Meadows. Like the staff there was awesome, and
Why were they awesome? Did they understand SEALs? Did they understand what you were trying to accomplish? What was, because we've heard all the stories about the rehabs.
yeah, I think they were just more focused on recovery. It was just a better atmosphere.
Okay.
So it was very good, and I also was very honest. I was like, okay, like I almost blew my head off, and couldn't talk to the kids, and that was horrible.
Yeah, I know how much you love your kids.
So that was like a very difficult thing to go through.
Yeah. So you get done with the Meadows. You have some sobriety.
Yep. And so my life went from like, hey, struggling, busy, struggling, everything's kind of crazy, to like my whole life turned upside down. So, and then from there was, because I had, almost blew my head off, like that got spun into protection order, turned against me, even though I was no threat to anybody,
So you got done with the Meadows. Do you relapse after that?
No,
So you went from the Meadows and you stayed sober.
stayed sober and almost at 4 years.
Yeah. So how did you? And I know everything you've been through because I'm your sponsor. How did you get connected to Seals and Recovery after the Meadows? And how? What was it? What was the dead space in between that?
So the psychiatrist, the one that picked up the phone on that Sunday, who saved my life, she said, "Hey, there's this group. Call." And so I called, and actually, no, I just showed up, and that's when it was small. I mean, at that point, there was like 3 or 4 of us.
Yeah, there'd be 3 or 4 of us for 6 to 8 months. And how many you didn't miss a meeting for how long? 3 years?
Yeah.
3 years. He was there every Wednesday.
Yep. And then it was like, all right, you got to live life too, And
Yeah,
I was
but,
like, okay,
but you had it by
but-
then. He did his service commitment. He was there. He chaired meetings. He helped organizationally. But what I could tell you else he did, he can go into what he's done in recovery. I watched him do everything he needed to do to get the trust of his ex-wife back, to be able to see your children, to move on with your career, to take college courses. But you did everything right. You didn't leave anything to chance.
Yeah.
When it comes to things you could actually control. And then there was many late night calls with you, with me, and coming over here and just trust the process. And it worked out because he was actually doing everything he was supposed to be doing, which is a rare find. That's why he was a Rookie of the Year and an MVP the next year and continues with a very high batting average in his program. But so what was it like when you realize, like, and when you're sober, you look back and you kind of say, God damn, I was really messed up.
Yeah.
In your sobriety, like, who was this guy?
Yeah, I mean, I look back and and it's sad, But yeah, I mean, you just understand, and now I can see it's like, okay, that's a coping mechanism, because he was miserable. When I was drinking, I was miserable.
Yeah, we have horrible coping
And
mechanisms.
it's like like I didn't even enjoy it. I was doing it just so that like I didn't feel anything, So and to be able to sleep and and then it just got out of control. So it's great now, like just living life totally sober is awesome, So and I consider this real sobriety because it's not just not drinking. It's, hey, I'm working on being a better person all the time. And that happens. It's a constant thing, always working on.
That is terrific. So now that you have some road behind you in sobriety, how do you? I know you've called me to ask me questions about how do I deal with this person. What is your like? My method is I'm gonna meet you where you're at and I'm gonna tell you how I did it. My demands aren't high. There is some demands, mostly connectivity. But so when you're dealing with somebody that wants to get sober, and you've brought several people into the room, and God bless you, and they're still there. How do you deal with that person that's struggling?
I just talk to him and I kind of let him know my story, and then I let him know too. I'm like, hey, it took me a couple times to get it right, but this is how I got it right.
It's hard dealing with lost leaders too. That you can see what's happening, and you have to actually let them burn in. I think that's the hardest part about working with other alcoholics is, they just haven't hit their bottom, and no matter what you say to them, institutions, jails and death, it's pretty much the story. It's no matter what you say, especially that the people you deal with, went through SEAL training, that they went through this training and they can't stop drinking. And Jesse, who wouldn't mind me using his name here, is he said in one meeting that stopping drinking was harder than buds, and that was really that was a lightning rod that he said that. And I'm just curious, and so you're in a different atmosphere, you're a contractor and you're still around the guys and everything. How frustrating is it when you see a guy that really needs help, but he's kind of out of bounds, you don't want to say nothing? Isn't it hard to watch?
Yeah, I mean,
We know the
I
signs.
go off of the certain things. I'll talk to him, but I mean, you hear me say these phrases. It's like, hey, I'll be a lighthouse, not a lifeguard.
Yep.
And, hey, you're going to take that elevator down. And what floor you get off is up to you. But the path to getting healthy again is the exact same. So it's like, you pick what you want to lose. But, like, you keep going down.
You pick what you want to lose.
And it's like, hey, at some point, the pain's not hard enough or whatever. But it's like, hey, and I let them know, hey, get in with our group. Because that was the difference for me. I mean, I cut pretty much everybody else out. It's like, hey, like my family now is like you guys. You know what I mean? And it's like, hey, I mean, you know that you're the same way. It's like we hang out with other guys like
So again, another one of my shorts, sober tip of the day is people, place, and things.
Yeah.
And you can't get serious with sobriety until you cut all that rancid stuff out of your life.
Yep.
SEALs have friends for everything. SEALs have guys you go golfing with, go to the movies with, drink with. I mean, we can find a playmate for anything. In a SEAL group of guys, and most of it's unhealthy. A lot of it, some of it's healthy. But tell us about before we wrap it up. And this is just a testimony of what a great guy this guy is. Tell me all the things that you've accomplished since you've been sober. With schooling, with starting a business, with being a contractor, with coaching your kids, I mean, it's amazing. And I see it. I don't tell you all the time, but I just watch this thing and I'm like, I'm so proud of you.
Yeah. So, finished my MBA. So that was great, from William & Mary. I coach my kids' soccer teams, so there for them. Indoor, outdoor, and that's like my main focus right now is, hey, just being a great dad.
Well, you also started a nice little side business, counseling and mentorship, which is, amazing.
Yep.
It goes right into what you're doing with your life.
Yep. So trying to help people out, get people on track, and, give back. And, but everything has lined up, and not to say that there haven't been tons of curveballs.
Everybody's going to have it, but we're sober to deal with them.
Sober to deal with them, and at the end of the day, just looking in the mirror and being like, hey, I know that I've done the next right thing. Consistently can be able to be like, hey, I've done the next right thing. So at any point, it's like, yeah, hey, I have no problem being like, hey, everything I've done, I would have no problem being like, hey, everybody in the world, look at this, No regret there.
And what else Dan does really good within his program is that he understands the past, but he doesn't dwell on it, and he doesn't continually beat himself up. And he's a very, very positive person, and it's, it rubs off on other people in our group for sure, especially the new guys. Like I forgot what new sobriety looks like. I mean, you kind of remember it. You're going to forget about it soon. You're going to have to tap somebody else, say, I don't know what the first week looks like. I don't know what rehab looks like, because you're going to have it's going to be so far behind you in a rearview mirror.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I still remind myself of it just to keep it fresh.
Of course.
But yeah, glad it's behind me and way better now than I was,
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure. I love you, man. Great work. All right. I'm going to try to get Jesse, who's got a story too, next week. But thanks again, man.
Thanks, John.
Yep.